attention, please. All right. Thank you for being in here. Thank you for being attentive. And we and girls, we have a great school system. We do not have some of the problems that some of these surrounding areas have. We're very blessed to be here with great teachers. We have several of your teachers in here. Y'all give your teachers a hand. And also our counselors, Ms. Cox and Ms. Sills are in the back. Give them a hand. Great job as they do. So there's a lady named Linda Dutil. She's a registered nurse. She's out of the geography lesson. She's out of the top northeast state in the United States. What is that? Who said it? Maine. She's from Maine. She's all the way here from Maine. She travels all over the country speaking. She was in Texas last week. She's coming through Georgia. So recently this year, and we've seen it coming, but we've had an increase in vaping. All right? So I'm not telling y'all anything, but it's kind of interesting because that's part of her presentation, drug, alcohol awareness. So she'll talk to you about that. But I really want you to understand that this vaping is very serious. All right? We've kind of grouped vaping in with tobacco, and we're finding out it's really a lot worse than tobacco. We've had a couple of incidences in school where we've found some drug-related paraphernalia associated with vaping. All right, that's a drug offense. That could actually be a felony. All right, depending on your age. So we will handle that appropriately. Mr. Strength is working with Sheriff's Department to come up with some procedures, identification. It's very hard to catch a vaping because it doesn't smell. You don't see it quite as easy. It's kind of rampant in the bathrooms, I know that. So we're working with our teachers and for ways for us to identify it a little bit better. If we have it's called a reasonable suspicion. If somebody comes up to me and says, hey, I saw Jabin in the bathroom vaping, I can pull Jabin in. Listen, I can pull Jabin in, grab Ms. Moore, and we can search him. Right? It's not like being out in the public. Police can't do that. We actually have more authority than the deputies do. Okay? So if we have a reasonable suspicion, it can just be somebody said they saw you doing it. We can search you. Okay? So make sure you understand that. Do not have it on your person. It should not even be in your car out in the parking lot. We don't go search your cars unless there's an important reason. But we can. So Ms. Dutil is going to talk to you about a variety of things. She's going to hit on the vaping, drugs, alcohol awareness, some of that kind of thing. So make sure y'all give her your undivided attention. She's got a little bit of a student interaction here, so make sure you are listening to her very carefully, paying attention. It's a great presentation. She's got some interesting pictures to show you as we go through this. So if y'all give her a hand, Ms. Linda Dutil, I'm going to turn it over to her.
Good morning, thank you. Good morning. Before we begin, I'd like to say thank you to the teachers and staff for letting me interrupt your academic time. My husband is a teacher. My husband is a high school math teacher. So I live and breathe your world in my house every day, so thank you. So I'm an emergency room nurse. I'm here today to share with you what I see in the hospital, in the emergency room, involving teenagers who have made poor choices with drugs, alcohol, smoking, vaping. I'm not here today to lecture. I'm not here today to tell you what to do. The last thing that you want is for some nurse to come into your school, bless you, for some nurse to come into your school and say things like, don't drink, don't do drugs. I'm not here today to tell you what to do because what you do with your body in your life is your choice. Life is all about choices. So today I'm going to share a couple of stories. I'm going to share some information about the dangers of drugs, alcohol, vaping, and then I'm going to show you, here's the good part, we're going to do this demonstration about what happens to your body if you should end up in the emergency room. Yeah, I'm going to show you what we have to do to save your life. Now, on the topic of alcohol, I could tell you all kinds of stories, drinking and driving, alcohol poisoning. I'd like to share the story of a young man, he was a senior in high school, by the name of Bob, pretty common name, Bob. Well, what happened was, this was the end of the year, and it was finals time, and his friends were taking their finals. He went over to a friend's house to get a little thumb drive, flash drive that had some notes, and this friend of his, other friends, they had finished their finals. They were like done. So he walked in the door, and this kid stuck a shot of whiskey into his hand. And he turned to him, and he's like, whoa, I am not drinking. I just came to get those notes. He said, I am not drinking. So his friend did this, turned around to his buddies and said, hey guys, heads up. Bob doesn't want to drink. What do you think? So Bob looked at him and said, seriously. He said, I will have one drink. He took that shot of whiskey, he took one drink, then he did more and more. And as the story goes that night, somebody actually saw him with that whiskey bottle in his hand, and that night he consumed a large enough quantity of alcohol, in this case whiskey, that it became toxic to his body. Basically, it shut down his breathing, his respiratory center. Most people don't realize that if your body has alcohol poisoning, and I know it's a little bit weird, what happens is it shuts down your breathing or your respiratory center, and in Bob's case, his brain told his lungs that they didn't have to breathe anymore, and he died. And I have to tell you, it was very, very sad. You know, working in the emergency room, we see all kinds of things, broken bones, heart attacks, asthma, but it's these situations that are the toughest for us because we know that they're totally preventable and totally avoidable. Now, also on the topic of alcohol, I have to tell you, and it's a little bit gross. That is, if someone has been drinking and drinking, the next thing you know, they start throwing up. Yeah, alcohol can be harsh on your stomach, especially if you're not used to drinking. Well, if that happens to your friend, you turn around and your friend is throwing up, make sure that you roll them over so that they don't choke. And if you do that, well, that's how you'll save their life. Now, one time I was in a school, there was a student right down here. He raised his hand and he said, okay, wait a minute. He said, that part about rolling your friend over, he said, exactly how do I roll somebody over if they're throwing up? And I looked at him and his friend was doing this. His friend was giving him the elbow, like it was a dumb question. And I said, no, that's a good question. How would you know unless somebody has shown you? So if you're at a party and your friend has been drinking and drinking, but now he or she is throwing up, well, you do not want them laying face down on their stomach like this because they would choke. And you do not want them laying on their back. If they're throwing up, they would choke. Make sure that you roll them to their side. Roll them to their side. Oh, and do this. Put them on the floor if you can, where it's hard. You want to get them off the bed, off the couch. It's too soft. Because just imagine your friend is on the couch and they do this. They roll forward, they could suffocate. So you want to put them on the floor where it's hard, roll them to their side so that their face is just like this, right next to the floor. And if you do that, that's how you'll save their life. Now, that was alcohol. On the topic of drugs, I could tell you so many stories about so many drugs. And when it comes to a drug overdose, people will ask me about that. What does that mean? One time a teenage girl came down after the presentation, I'll never forget. I turned to look at her and she had tears in her eyes. And I said, are you okay? And she said, I had this uncle, he died from a drug overdose. She said it was so sad. She said it was bad for the family. She said, but nobody told us what he took. It just was a drug overdose. She said, so what all can that include? I said, that's a good question. Most people don't realize a drug overdose could be a lot of different things. It could mean any of the serious illegal drugs, of course, like heroin, meth, cocaine, crack cocaine, any of those drugs. That would be a drug overdose if someone took those. But a drug overdose could also mean swallowing pills, prescription, over-the-counter medication. We have people rush to the hospital all the time because they've swallowed a bunch of pills. Now, also on the topic of drugs, I'd like to talk for a minute about the drug marijuana. this morning. Now, if I came into a school and I didn't talk about marijuana, I would be a very silly nurse. Marijuana is just huge nationwide. It has been for a long time, but it's even bigger now with teenagers. And it's hard for me to talk about. Marijuana is one of the hardest things for me to talk about, the dangers, for a few reasons. The first reason is, well, there's such a casual attitude that smoking marijuana is no big deal. That makes it hard to talk about the dangers. It's being legalized in so many states in the country, not Georgia yet. Maine, the state of Maine, from the Northeast, I'm from Maine. A few years ago, they legalized marijuana at the state level. So many states in the country, I think there's 10 or 12 right now. So that makes it hard for me to talk about the dangers. There are significant medical benefits. There are some medical benefits, absolutely, with marijuana. And then the last reason that makes it hard for me to talk about is it's not the most dangerous drug. It's not the most dangerous. But just because something's not the most dangerous doesn't mean that there aren't dangers. Marijuana does have a lot of dangers. This is what marijuana does to your body. It alters your short-term memory, long-term memory, concentration. It affects this part of your brain called the hippocampus. Hippocampus? Yeah, it's part of your limbic system, and it connects with your frontal lobe, and it's responsible for things like memory and learning and emotion and concentration. So marijuana, the THC part, the active ingredient, tetrahydrocannabinol, so that THC part of marijuana does all that to your brain. That's not good for a teenager's developing brain, absolutely. Marijuana also, it affects organs in your body, different organs in your body. You know, if you're smoking marijuana, that's not good for your lungs. So marijuana is the hardest thing for me to talk about when I travel. The last thing about marijuana I have to tell you, though, is that it alters and changes your judgment every single time. One time there was a student right here, and he went like this, and he said, "What is judgment?" I'm like, "Come on, judgment, how you perceive things." You know, if you're driving and the police stop you and they think you're drinking and driving, what do? Everybody knows this. You have to get out of the car, you have to walk a straight line, and if you stumble over, they think you've been drinking. Well, it's no different if you've smoked marijuana and your judgment is altered and you hit that tree going 50 miles an hour. Marijuana is the hardest thing for me to talk about. There's such a casual attitude, but there's still a lot of dangers. Now, the last drug, before I get into this demonstration to show you the life-saving procedures in the ER, the last drug I'd like to talk about is the drug nicotine. The drug nicotine, if you're smoking, vaping, juuling, smoking, vaping, juuling. One time I was in a school, this boy came up to me, teenager, he went like this. He said, "Yeah," he said, "I juul, but I don't vape." He gets it. So I looked at him, I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I juul and I don't vape." So most of you probably know this. Juul is just a name brand of an electronic cigarette. Juul, J-U-U-L. That's like if you have a cold, you say, "Hey, does somebody have a Kleenex?" when you want a tissue, just a name brand. So Juul is just a name brand of an electronic cigarette. So nicotine, this drug nicotine, it is a very serious and very, very strong drug. People don't realize it's very addictive. One of the most addictive drugs on Earth, on the whole planet Earth, very addictive. Nicotine's not good for a lot of organs in your body, especially your heart. Nicotine can increase your heart rate, your blood pressure. It constricts the vessels, arteries and veins, which makes it hard for the blood to flow, which gives you heart disease. So that's really, really bad for your health. Nicotine also, like the THC, does this with that hippocampus. No, what? Hippocampus in your brain. It's such an important part of your brain that works with the frontal lobe. It also does the same thing. It affects your memory and your concentration and your learning ability. So nicotine is not good for a teenager's developing brain. So nicotine is bad. Okay, we have just established nicotine is bad. Let's talk about smoking. Let's start with this. The old-fashioned, traditional, stinky, smelly cigarette. I was in the school and someone said, "You can't have that in here." I said, "Well, I'm here to do a presentation. I have to have this in here." So, with these cigarettes, smoking tobacco's been around for hundreds of years. So with these cigarettes, you light the tobacco burns, and this thing called combustion happens. Combustion is when anything burns. It could be a piece of wood in a campfire, and when combustion happens, all these toxins and chemicals are produced. hundreds and hundreds, so that's really bad. So you've got the nicotine. We know nicotine's bad. You've got the combustion with the burning of the tobacco that's producing so many chemicals, and the smoke going into your lungs, and it produces tar, and it's just, everybody knows these are bad for your health. Now let's talk about this. This is a little guy here. This is vape pen. These come in all kinds of shapes and sizes and colors. That Jewel brand that's so popular is shorter and wider. So with this, when you smoke, you do this. You press a little button, it activates a little battery, it warms up this chamber of liquid, and when you smoke it, this vaporized mist of liquid goes into your lungs. So you might say, okay, nurse, okay, so there's no smoke. There's no combustion, there's no burning of tobacco, there's no chemicals. So vaping is not dangerous, right? Let me explain the dangers of vaping. Well, you've got the nicotine. We've already determined that nicotine is bad. One time I was in a school and the student came up to me and he did this. He said, yeah, I vape and there's no nicotine. I said, you vape and there's no nicotine? This was after a presentation. It was in the gym and he was standing right here by my table. There was a whole bunch of kids gathered around. So I said, you vape and there's no nicotine? He said, yep. I said, okay, let me get this straight. I said, you need to tell me that you suck into your lungs vaporized mist of liquid with no nicotine to do what? Look super cool in front of your friends? So now he's nervous. He's like, well, maybe. And his friends are all laughing. And I said, guys, it's all about the nicotine. Do they make vape pens without nicotine? They do. Yeah, yes, you're right, very few. It's all about the nicotine. So if someone tells you this, if they say, I vape and there's no nicotine, it's probably one of two things. They're either lying or they don't realize there's nicotine in that vape pen. Okay, back to the same kid. So he's standing there. Now there's more kids gathered around. He goes like this. He said, wait. He said, I vape because I like those flavors. He said, I like banana. I like those flavors. And by the way, I heard on the news today the government's trying to ban all the flavors. I'm not sure if and when that happened, but that was on the news today. But anyways, he said, I like the flavors. So I said, okay, let's assume you're vaping with no nicotine and you like the artificial flavors. Well, that's not good for your lungs. Your lungs were meant for air, oxygen, not artificial flavors, not THC, not nicotine, not smoke. I said, your lungs were made for air. So now there's like 30 kids gathered around, and there's this kid way in the back. He's super tall, and he raises his hand. He goes, excuse me, I have a question. And I could tell by looking at him, he was going to be a little bit of a wise guy. And a big smile on his face. I said, okay. He said, okay, I vape, no nicotine, no flavors. So now tell me how this is harmful. So I looked at him and I said, come on. I said, okay. I said, if you're vaping with no nicotine, no flavors, like, why? But if you're doing that, it's still not good for you. Because what you have in here is there's these chemicals that bind everything together, not as many as a cigarette, but there are chemicals that bind everything together. There has to be. This is just a mechanism. This is a vehicle to get nicotine into your body. And you can't have nicotine in that chamber and just suck it through a vaporized mist of liquid without having some of those chemicals to make that mechanism happen. So those chemicals are not good for you. And then just the fact of sucking in deep, very, very concentrated vaporized mist of liquid is not good for your lungs. So you've probably seen on the news that people are dying from vaping. Now you might be doing this, you might be thinking, come on, they're not dying from, they're not dying from vaping, it's just the government trying, it's a scare tactic. I have to tell you, people are dying from vaping, and what's happening is, it's a little bit weird, these lung doctors, they're called pulmonologists, they're a little bit freaked out. They can't figure out what's going on. These young people are dying, and I saw in the news, it was a doctor from Houston, they interviewed her, and she said, she goes, I have dealt with lung issues for 20 years. She goes, I've never seen anything like this. And she said, we don't know how to treat it. The last thing about vaping, I want you to remember this. If someone comes up to you and they say, yeah, vaping's not as bad as regular cigarettes, you can look at them and say, well, yeah, maybe it's not as bad. That's like saying, now remember this is a little bit harsh, but I gotta tell you this because it's the only analogy I can think of. So think about this. That's like saying, yeah, last week I got punched in the head 20 times, but this week it was only 10 times, so whoa, it was not as bad. Well, yeah, but getting punched in the head 10 times is still pretty bad. So remember that. Remember that getting punched in the head 10 times versus 20 times if someone tells you that electronic cigarettes are not as bad as regular cigarettes, just because something is not as bad. I have to tell you, for the adults here, we are looking at a whole generation of teenagers addicted to nicotine who probably never would have done this. They probably never would have smoked that traditional, stinky, smelly cigarette. It is an epidemic nationwide. Okay, I'd like to show you, I'd like to do this demonstration about what happens to your body when you end up in the emergency room. Now, I'm talking about a drug overdose, alcohol poisoning, and even though vaping is so huge right now in society, these issues are still really important too. So when a drug overdose or alcohol poisoning patient comes in, that doctor, he or she, has to make a decision, this big decision. They have two choices. We call it Plan A or Plan B, two choices. The first choice, Plan A, is made when the doctor decides that whatever you've taken, whatever you've swallowed, whatever's in your stomach, well, it might make you feel sick, but not cause serious damage. So that first choice, Plan A, not as dangerous, not as serious. The second choice, Plan B, is made when the doctor does this. The doctor looks at you and says, whoa, I think that whatever you've taken is so dangerous, we need to get your stomach contents out. And that involves putting a tube down into your stomach. Now I'm going to show you the tube in a minute, but before I do, I'd like to go back to Plan A, the one that's not as dangerous, not as serious. Well, even though it's not as dangerous, it's a little bit gross. A little bit gross. What Plan A involves is drinking this stuff called charcoal, liquid charcoal. It is sent to the emergency room in a tube like this. This charcoal is liquid. It's thick, it's black, it's really gritty. It's kind of like, well, I have some here in a bag that's all dried up. It's kind of like if you could imagine having a milkshake with no flavor, which is kind of weird, and then you threw in something gritty like sand or gravel or mud, and you have to drink it. In fact, you have to drink 2 cups of the liquid charcoal. Now, this charcoal is amazing. What it does, it helps to bind or neutralize whatever you've taken, kind of collects it up like a magnet, and helps it to pass quickly out of your body. So that's Plan A, drinking that charcoal. Plan B, as I mentioned, is when we have to put the tube into your stomach, and I have to be honest, this tube can go into your body 2 ways. We can put this tube either through your mouth to the back of your throat to your stomach, or, and that's not what you're thinking, through your nose to the back of your throat to your stomach. People always think of this alternative route to go into your body. So through your mouth or through your nose, and it is done for 2 reasons. That tube is done it's done for 2 reasons. It's done if you refuse to drink the charcoal. Now you might say, okay, nurse, why would I refuse to drink the charcoal if you tell me that I have to? Well, just imagine you're rushed to the hospital. I'm your nurse. I'm trying to save your life. And I ask you very nicely, because I am a very nice nurse. I say, please drink this charcoal. But then you do this. You look at me and say, whoa, I'm not drinking that. Well, then we need to put a tube down to flush the charcoal down. But it's also done if the doctor decides that whatever you've taken is so dangerous, we need to get your stomach contents out. Now, before I explain this any further, I really could use the help of 2 volunteers. And I have 2 names. Thank you for the hands. I have 2 names. Now, when I call these names, I want everyone to know this is just pretend, just make believe. No tubes, no charcoal in anyone's body. The young lady is Mackenzie Tripp, coming down. She's graduated. Well, son of a gun. How about Tyler Wiggles? Sorry, Tyler. Okay. Who else had their hand up that they wanted? They met Alicia at Mackenzie. Okay. and Tyler. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so Alicia and Tyler are going to help me show you this process. And Tyler, what grade are you in? You're a senior. I was in a school one time, and it was a junior that came down. And he was like so excited to be in front of his friends. He didn't hear me say pretend or make believe. So he gets up here, and all of a sudden, he thinks I'm going to put this tube in. And I turned around, and he had passed out right there. So no tubes, no charcoal, anyone's mouth. So what we're going to do, Alicia and Tyler are going to help me show you this process. Alicia is going to be another nurse, going to help me, which means that Tyler is going to be the patient. So hang on here. If you could both stand next to the screen, please. And Tyler, you can stay there for a minute. Alicia, you can stand right here where I am. Look at the audience. Now, to start with, I'm going to give Alicia this bag to hold, but I'd like to explain it. It's this big bag that we fill with water, and it has all of this tubing attached. So let me explain this before I hand it to Alicia. So we fill this bag with water. We fill this right to the top. And what we do, we pop this tab, we put this to the sink, and we fill it up with tap water from the sink. Now one time there was a boy right here, he looked at me and he said, water from the sink? He said, wait a minute, if this is a medical procedure, don't you use sterile water? And I looked at him and I said, uh-huh. I said, if you think about what you eat in the course of the day, yeah, think about what you eat. Your stomach is not a sterile place. So we fill it up with tap water. Then we hook this part of the tube to the tube that goes into your stomach, which I'm going to show you. We begin this amazing process. We flush this water into your stomach, then pump it out. So Alicia, if you can hold this in one hand and this part in the other. Now, if Tyler was my patient in the emergency room, maybe you or someone you know has been to the hospital. You know that everybody has to wear a very snazzy hospital gown. Tyler? He's going to be smiling. Turn around this way, make sure you're all covered up. Okay, Tyler, if you could have a seat in that chair, please. Now, in the emergency room, it gets so busy, sometimes, hang on. Guy with a great smile, right there, yeah, hey guy, why don't you see this? Okay, we've already talked about his smile earlier. Okay, so it gets so busy, sometimes we think the place is going to turn upside down. We have nicknames for things, like you have in your life. The official name, we actually call this the barf bucket. Barf bucket because if you've made poor choices with drugs or alcohol, yeah, you're probably throwing up. So Tyler, if you could hang on to that barf bucket, which has not been used. Now I'm going to grab this. The nurses and doctors, we have these gowns that we wear. They're a lightweight plastic material. Everyone who's working in the emergency room puts one on. So that would be nurses, doctors, x-ray technicians, police officers. One time I was in a school, and there was a student right here. He went like this. He said, police? Why would the police be in the emergency room? I said, well, when you think about it, if you've been drinking a lot or doing drugs, many times you're out of control. One time I was working, I'll never forget, and I'm not very big. I looked up, this huge man, his brain was so crazy on the drugs, he was doing this. He was coming towards me, and he's like kicking and screaming. So the police come in, they help us hold people down. So we put on a gown, we put on gloves, always put on gloves, and, I have to show you this. We also have these big plastic face shields because, you ready for this? It's a little bit gross. Sometimes the patients will spit at us. I know it sounds gross, but their brain gets crazy on the drugs, but Tyler is not going to spit at me, am I correct? He's not going to spit at me. I'm not going to put my face shield on. Now, the tube that goes into your stomach, this tube is, it's a pretty big tube. I mean, when you think about it, if our purpose is to get your stomach contents out, we can't use a little tiny skinny tube. So this is the tube that we use that goes into your stomach. Now the other thing I want to mention, remember I told you we had two choices, through the mouth or through the nose? We usually go through the nose. We can go through the mouth, but if we go through the mouth, it wiggles around, people bite on it. Just imagine I'm trying to save your life and you do this. you bite down so I can't push it down. So we usually go through the nose. Now, I'm not going to actually put this into my stomach, but I would like to show you the size of this in my right nostril. We put it into your nose, and we push and push and push until it gets to the back of your throat, but then we run into a problem because we want to make sure that this tube goes from your esophagus to your stomach, not your trachea to your lungs. Yeah, we want this in your stomach, not your lungs. So while that tube is right there in the back of your throat, we ask you to take a drink of water with a straw, and when you do that, and you make that gulping sound, gulp, then we give the tube a shove. And we push and push until it gets into your stomach. Now, Tyler, are we ready? Just pretend. So this goes, thank you, Tyler. It goes into the nose, to the back of the throat. We ask you to take that drink of water with a straw. And when you do that, and you make that gulping sound, Tyler, say the word gulp.
Gulp.
That was a good gulp. Then we give the tube a shove, and we push and push until it gets into your stomach. Now with your right hand over here, if you can hold this right up by your nose like it's coming out of your nostril, good job. Then we take this part of the tube right here, we hook it to the bag that Alicia's holding. Alicia, you hold the blue part, and I'll take all this tubing. We plug it in right here like this. Alicia, if you could take a step back, please, just so they can see over here. So we plug it in right here, but then there's this loose end of tubing that's just hanging down here. We're going to hook this loose end to wall suction, a big box on the wall that has suction. So Alicia, hold that bag up high so they can see. So we fill the bag with water, we flush the water through the tube into the stomach, clamp off the bag, and suck it out. And we flush it in, suck it out. We do it over and over until all of your stomach contents come back up like, what did you have to eat today? How about cereal? What's your favorite cereal in the whole world? Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Or anything that's in your stomach. It could be drugs or alcohol. Everything comes back up. Now when these tubes run clear, we disconnect the bag. Alicia, I'm going to give this back to you. Before we pull that out of his stomach, there's one more thing we have to do. Something has to go in. What do you think? How about these guys right here? What do you think? The charcoal. The charcoal has to go back in. So I take a big syringe like this, fill it up with a liquid charcoal. I fill it as much as my hand will hold. My hand is small. It's pretty small. I could fill this about 2/3 with the liquid charcoal. Then I hook that to the tube going into the stomach like that, and I flush in the charcoal. So that's what we have to do to save your life. Everybody give them a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you for getting that liquor bottle. Okay. Now, one time I was in a school, and I finished my presentation, and I looked to my left, and there was this whole group of boys coming towards me. This one boy was really tall. He had this big smile on his face. Well, he got to right about here, and he looked nervous. And I looked at him, and I said, can I help you? And he said, okay, thanks for coming to our school. He said, but I think if I knew that all of this was going to happen to my friend's body, he said, I think I'd have a hard time calling for help. And I looked at him, and I said, you are absolutely right. Making that choice to get help for your friends, making that decision, it may be the hardest choice ever, but remember, you have the power to save your friend's life. Okay, I have some pictures to show. Some pictures of drug users, overdose patient. And if we could, get the lights in, please. This first picture, this one is a little bit faded. faded. The next ones will be clearer. See the guy in the background? See how his eyes are blacked out? That big black mark? That's because of confidentiality. Not that you would know this man, but you'll see that black mark on his eyes. So the official name for this procedure, the medical name, is called gastric lavage, but we just call it stomach pumping process. The nurse on the left, she is regulating an IV intravenous line. You can see it in the bend of his right arm. Maybe you or someone you know has had this. I have to tell you, this is the most important part. When an overdose patient comes in, sometimes we need to get medicine quickly to your heart. Oh, wait a minute. I mentioned those serious illegal drugs like heroin, meth, cocaine. The stimulants, cocaine and crack cocaine, those drugs can stop your heart within minutes. So this is really important. Oh, I forgot to mention, when Tyler was sitting in the chair, that usually we have to tie you down. I know, nobody's going to come to the ER, look at me and say, hey nurse, put that big tube in. Yeah, right? People get angry, they get scared. This man, we were strapping down his wrists. All of a sudden, he started kicking at us. So we had to strap down his legs, a big strap on his legs. And then, this is a little bit gross, but then he threw up. I know, we hadn't even put the tube in and he threw up everywhere. Now here's one putting the tube in, and another one, and the closer one. Now, that's me on the left. Somebody right in front of me just said, is that you? That is me. And let me show you something. It's kind of hard to see. In my right hand, I have that syringe full of charcoal that I explained to you that we have to flush in. It's kind of hard to see. It's over my right shoulder like this, but you can see that I'm flushing the charcoal through the tube into the stomach. I have to tell you, that charcoal, the liquid charcoal, it always makes a mess. It goes all over the clothes, all over the floor, liquid charcoal everywhere. This is the last picture with this group. We pulled the tube, wiped his face. He's holding the bucket like the one Tyler was holding. Now the next group of pictures are pictures of drug users, and you may have seen some of these on the internet. I'm going to explain why drugs do this to your body. This first group is one woman, and it shows her age 30 to age 40. What happened was she was doing drugs and arrested by the police. Doing drugs, arrested, doing drugs. That's why there's so many pictures of one woman. So here she is at age 30, looking pretty fine. She just kept doing drugs, and more drugs, more drugs. Now this one here, if you look right here, see how her eyes, her makeup's kind of smudged? She looks okay to me, except for that smudged makeup, her mascara smudged, but she looks okay. It is the next one where you see the first really big change. So, age 30 to age 40. Oh, wait a minute. Back up here. See this part right here? I heard that, I know what you mean. See this part? See how her cheeks are sunken in? I was in the school one time. This boy walked up to me and he said, whoa, that lady in the pictures, why are her cheeks sunken in? Well, what these drugs do, these serious drugs, they do this. They make you rot from the inside out, and then they make your teeth and gums rot. So I'm sure at age 40, she no longer had any teeth. Oh, and then I was in a school and somebody said, how did you get so many pictures of one woman? Well, as I mentioned, she was arrested so many times, and guess what? There were 5 more I didn't use. 5 more pictures of her arrest. I could not fit them on the board. I know, so sad. Now the next group show before and after. I don't have the in-between shots. There's before, and you'll notice in the lower left, there is a sheriff's badge. None of these people are deputies for the sheriff's department. It's just the department that took the pictures, and they wanted to get credit, so you'll see that. So there's before. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute, one more thing. Besides doing this, besides making your teeth and gums rot, these drugs, they cause these sores, these horrible sores all over your body.
This is 1.5 years later. This is 1.5.
This one here, I was in a school one time, and there was this girl right in the front, and this girl, she looked at this picture, and this girl had this little quiet voice. She looked at this picture, and I heard her say, "Oh, she's so pretty." Okay, the last group of drugs, I know. The last group of drugs show, hang on. Do you know how many times I've seen these? I feel the same way. I'm grossed out every time. The last group show how these drugs affect your teeth and gums in particular, but I'd like to explain it first because somebody always asks. I'll start showing these pictures and somebody right in the front will say, why does that happen? So I'm going to explain it before I show the pictures. Drugs make your mouth dry, super dry. Well, if your mouth is dry, there's no saliva or spit. You need saliva. Saliva contains enzymes. You need enzymes to kill bacteria. Bacteria is what causes tooth decay and your teeth rot. Of course, there's other factors, poor hygiene, poor nutrition. Those things also affect your teeth and gums. You know, people who are doing drugs, they do not care about brushing their teeth or eating healthy, but the biggest reason that drug users have rotted teeth is because their mouth gets so dry. Now, you might be thinking, well, hello, why don't they just drink a bunch of water? Drink a bunch of water, stay hydrated so those enzymes stay in their mouth. You need to remember that when you start doing drugs, you can't think straight. You can't even remember to drink water. So I just want to mention, if anybody does this, they walk up to you with drugs and they say, just try it. It's no big deal, just try it. Please remember these pictures. Okay, if I could have the lights on, please. We're doing perfect for time. Okay. I know, so close. The last thing I want to mention, hang on. Excuse me, this boy right here, and this girl right in the front, and these guys right here. I want you to hear my last story, okay? Because I've already talked to you. You guys are awesome. Last thing I want to mention has to do with the first story that I told about the teenager by the name of Bob, and he died from alcohol poisoning. Well, what I didn't tell you is what happens in the emergency room after someone is pronounced dead. And in this case, I was his nurse, and I remember that day when he was rushed in. Well, his family came in, his mother, his father, 2 teenage brothers, and a little sister. Well, I remember his parents went around to the head of the bed, his mother. She picked up his lifeless hand. She put her fingers through his. I remember the father was holding her up. The 2 teenage brothers, they were standing at the foot of the bed, and they were crying. And I just remember standing there doing everything that I could not to cry, when all of a sudden, there was a sound. And we looked at the door, and standing there was his little sister. In our grief, we'd forgotten this little girl. And she stood there with her eyes wide open and her face expressionless when all of a sudden she ran to the bed and she threw herself across his body. And that room was so quiet, you couldn't hear a sound except this little voice that said, "Please, Bobby, don't die. Please don't die." You need to realize that you all have the power to make good choices, and no one can take that away from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda, for coming out. You know, y'all are very lucky. Y'all don't realize, I've been in 6 different school systems, all right, in my education career, and this by far is just the best place. The community support, the students, you know, how well y'all do with academics. Our academics every year get better, so we're very proud of you. But we do have to deal with the issues that come here. One of the reasons we have such a good school system is, I think, that our administration, we get support from the board as we deal with problems when they happen. So, but I'm telling you now, we're going to crack down this vaping, all right? So I'm going to advise you, better not have it at school. Do not bring it, okay? Because we're going to get a handle on this. It's a problem that we're going to deal with. So just going to give you a warning on that. So we do a lot of positive things, but there are consequences to your actions. So remember that.